The dark shadows of war. In the cold depths of space, the small planet of Lyra floated silently. It was a peaceful world, rich in resources and home to many human colonists. They had come here to build a new life, far away from the wars that once plagued Earth. But now, dark shadows loomed over their bright future. An alien empire known as the had set their eyes on Lyra 7, and war was brewing. Captain Elara Reynolds stood on the bridge of her ship, the Starfire, staring at the holographic map of the system. The blinking red dots marked the positions of the Zetharian fleet. Each dot represented a ship, each ship a threat. Elara felt a chill run down her spine. She had faced danger before, but this was different. This time, the enemy was ruthless and powerful. The Zetharians were known for their advanced technology and strategic minds. They had conquered many planets, leaving destruction in their wake. The Council on Earth had warned the colonists about them, urging them to be vigilant. Yet, here they were, unprepared and caught off guard. Elara couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in her stomach. As she paced the bridge, her crew watched her closely. They were young and inexperienced, many of them just out of training. Elara felt responsible for their safety. She had to inspire them, to show them that hope still existed, even in dark times. "Listen up, everyone," Elara said, raising her voice. "The Zetharians are coming for us. We cannot let them take Lyra 7. This planet is our home. We've built lives here. We've planted seeds that have grown into a community. We must fight for what we love." The crew nodded, determination in their eyes, but Elara could see the fear behind their brave faces. She understood their worries. They were all thinking the same thing. What if they weren't strong enough? What if they lost everything? Suddenly, the ship's communications officer, Ensign Mira, interrupted her thoughts. "Captain, we've intercepted a Zetharian transmission. They're preparing for an attack." "Less than an hour," Mira replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "They've sent a message to their fleet to mobilize. They plan to hit us hard and fast." "Then we must act now," Elara commanded. "Rally all nearby ships. We need to prepare our defenses, call the colonists to the shelters, and get our weapons ready." As the crew scrambled to follow her orders, Elara glanced out of the viewport. The stars twinkled innocently, unaware of the impending conflict. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. They needed a plan, and they needed it quickly. "We have 3 ships in orbit and several civilian vessels nearby," Samir reported. "They are unarmed and can't engage in a fight. Our best bet is to use the terrain of Lyra 7 to our advantage. If we can draw thee into the canyons, we may have a chance." "Good thinking," Elara replied. "Let's set up a defensive line at the canyon entrance. We'll lure them in and take them by surprise." As they moved into action, the atmosphere on the ship changed. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with a sense of purpose. The crew worked together, checking systems and preparing weapons. Elara felt a swell of pride for her team. They were scared, but they were also determined to fight for their home. As they finished their preparations, the ship shook with the impact of distant explosions. Alarms blared, and red lights flashed around the bridge. "They're here," shouted Mira, her eyes wide with shock. "Battle stations," Elara shouted, her voice firm and steady. "We are not going to let them take us without a fight." The crew took their positions, and Elara felt her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. They were about to face the Zetharians, the mightiest force in the galaxy. But as she looked around at her crew, she felt something shift within her. They were not just soldiers. They were a family, fighting for each other and for their future. "Remember," Elara called out as the ship shook again, "we are humanity. We do not submit. We will fight." With that, the Starfire flew toward the heart of the storm. Elara was determined to protect her people, no matter the cost. As the enemy ships closed in, She felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. They might be outnumbered, but they would not go down without a fight. Together, they would defy the odds and show the galaxy what humanity was made of. The battle begins. The Starfire hurtled through space, its engines roaring with determination. Captain Elara Reynolds gripped the controls tightly, her eyes fixed on the approaching fleet. The sleek, menacing ships glided through the void, their dark hulls reflecting the stars like obsidian. Elara could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders, but she pushed the fear aside. This was a fight for survival. "Prepare to engage the enemy," Elara shouted, her voice strong and steady. "Target their lidship. That's where we need to strike first." The crew moved quickly, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Lieutenant Samir worked at his station, quickly calculating trajectories and weapon systems. "All weapons are online, Captain. We're ready to fire on your command." "On my mark," Elara replied, her heart racing. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. 3, 2, 1. Fire. Bright beams of energy shot from the Starfire, striking the lidship. The impact lit up the darkness of space, momentarily illuminating the scene like fireworks. The enemy vessel shuddered, its shields flickering under the onslaught. Cheers erupted from the crew, their spirits lifting for a brief moment. "Direct hit," shouted Mira, her fingers flying across the control panel. "Their shields are weakening." "Good. Keep the pressure on," Elara commanded, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the enemy. She could see the ships regrouping, their formations tightening as they prepared to counterattack. "Let's show them what humanity can do." As the Starfire unleashed another volley of fire, the enemy retaliated. Missiles shot through space, their trails glowing bright red against the darkness. Elara maneuvered the ship expertly, dodging the incoming fire. The bridge shook with the impacts, but Elara held her ground. "Captain, we're taking damage," Samir shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "Hull integrity is holding, but we can't take too many more hits. Redirect power from non-essential systems to shields," Elara ordered, her voice steady. "We can't let them break through our defenses." The crew worked quickly, diverting energy and focusing on their primary goal, survival. Elara could see the determination in their eyes. They were fighting for their home, their families, and their future. Each person on this ship was willing to risk everything, and that thought filled her with strength. Suddenly, the view screen flashed with warning lights. "Ships are flanking us," Mira shouted. "They're trying to surround us." "Adjust our course," Elara commanded, gripping the controls tighter. "We need to break through their formation." The Starfire veered sharply, dodging missiles, and weaving through the enemy ships. Elara's heart raced as they entered a chaotic dance of battle. Every decision counted, and one mistake could cost them everything. "Captain, our rear shields are down to 30%. Samir called out, his voice urgent. "We can't keep this up for long." "Hold on," Elara shouted, determined to push forward. She could see the canyons of Lyra 7 approaching in the distance. If they could just make it to the planet's surface, they could use the terrain to their advantage. "Prepare to engage the canyon strategy. We need to lead them into the canyons." As they approached the planet, the landscape below came into view. The canyons twisted and turned like a giant maze, providing the perfect cover for a surprise attack. "Get ready," Elara warned her crew. "We're going in." With a burst of speed, the Starfire plunged into the canyons, twisting and turning to avoid the cliffs. The ships followed closely behind, their sleek forms reflecting the sunlight as they dove into the narrow passages. The bridge was filled with tension. The crew's breath caught in their throats as they navigated the rocky terrain. "Hold steady," Elara commanded, her voice cutting through the anxiety. "We need to lure them in." Suddenly, the Starfire emerged from a narrow canyon, revealing a larger opening. Elara seized the moment. "Now, fire at will." The crew unleashed everything they had. Missiles streaked toward the enemy ships, and explosions lit up the sky. The sound of battle echoed through the canyons, a symphony of chaos and determination. "Direct hits," shouted Mira, excitement evident in her voice. "They're losing ships. Keep it up. We can turn this fight around," Ilara urged, feeling the surge of hope. But as the battle raged on, she noticed something alarming. The remaining ships were regrouping, their formations tightening again. They were preparing for one final push, and Ilara knew they had to act fast. "Lieutenant, prepare our last reserve of energy for a full-power strike," Ilara commanded. "We need to take them out before they can regroup." "Understood, Captain," Samir replied, focused and determined. As things charged forward, Ilara felt her heart pounding in her chest. This was their last chance. They had to win this battle, not just for themselves but for everyone on Lyra 7. "Now," Ilara shouted, her voice full of conviction. "Fire!" The Starfire released a concentrated blast of energy, striking the lid ship directly. The impact sent shockwaves through the canyon, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Ilara held her breath, praying for success. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, and cheers erupted from the crew. Ilara felt a wave of relief wash over her, but there was no time to celebrate. The battle was still raging. "Regroup. Keep fighting," Ilara commanded, pushing the Starfire forward. The fight for Lyra was far from over, but with every strike, every determination, humanity was proving that they would not submit. They would stand strong and fight back against the dark shadows of war. In the shadows, the battle raged on around the Starfire, explosions echoing in the depths of the canyons. Captain Ilara Reynolds focused on the mission at hand. The Zetharians had lost many ships, but their resolve was still strong. They fought fiercely, determined to crush the human ship before it could rally more forces. But Ilara had a plan. "Status report," she called out, glancing at the crew members hunched over their consoles. The tension in the air was thick, but she could sense the determination brewing within each of them. "Most of their front line is damaged, but they're regrouping for another attack," Lieutenant Samir replied, his fingers flying across the controls. "They won't back down easily." "Then we'll need to think fast," Ilara replied, her mind racing. "We need allies if we're going to push them back. There's a resistance group on Lyra. They might help us turn the tide." "Captain, the resistance group is mostly guerrilla fighters," Mira said, hesitating. "Are you sure they can hold their own against the... They don't have the firepower we do." Ilara nodded, her determination unwavering. "They know the terrain better than we do. If we can link up with them, they can ambush the while we draw their attention. We just have to reach them before it's too late." With a plan in place, Ilara steered the Starfire toward the heart of Lyra 7. The canyons twisted and turned like a labyrinth, but she was determined to navigate through them. The resistance fighters were their only hope of securing a victory. "Let's hope they're still there," Samir said, worry creeping into his voice. "They have been hunting them down for weeks. They're resilient. If they're still standing, they'll fight," Ilara assured him, gripping the controls tightly. As they maneuvered through the canyons, the tension began to shift. The crew worked together seamlessly, their camaraderie bolstered by the urgency of the mission. They needed to succeed, and together they could make it happen. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the radio. "This is Commander Lyra of the Lyra Resistance. We're picking up your ship on our scanners. Do you need assistance?" "Commander Lyra, this is Captain Ilara Reynolds of the Starfire," Ilara replied, relief flooding her. "We're under heavy attack from the... We need your help to turn the tide." "Understood. We have a safe zone not far from your position. We can provide cover while you get there," Lyra responded. "But we'll need your ship to provide air support while we regroup our fighters." "Count on us," Ilara said, determination in her voice. "We'll meet you at the coordinates." As the Starfire soared through the canyons, they began to encounter resistance fighters hidden within the rocky crevices. Ilara spotted small ships emerging, each one armed and ready to join the fight. These were the courageous men and women who had resisted the invaders since the beginning. "Looks like they've been preparing," Summer noted, awe evident in his voice. "They're really ready to fight." "Let's show them we're ready too," Ilara said, a smile creeping onto her face. "Time to join forces." Upon arriving at the resistance base, Ilara and her crew were greeted with a mix of relief and determination. Commander Lyra stood waiting, flanked by several fighters. Her expression was fierce, eyes filled with hope. "Welcome, Captain. We've been tracking the movements. We've seen how they operate, and we're ready to strike back," Lyra said, her voice steady and inspiring. Ilara felt a rush of gratitude. "We're here to help. Together, we can take them down. We need to coordinate our attacks." The resistance fighters gathered around the Starfire, and the atmosphere shifted to one of unity. They quickly began strategizing, laying out plans to ambush the Zetharians. Ilara was impressed by the fighters' knowledge of the terrain. They had a deep understanding of the canyons and how to use them to their advantage. As the plan took shape, Ilara noticed the determination in the eyes of the resistance fighters. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for freedom. Their passion fueled her resolve, and she could feel the energy in the air. "Let's prepare our ships," Lyra commanded, rallying her fighters. "We move out in 30 minutes. Our targets will be the supply lines." Ilara nodded. "I'll take the Starfire and cover your advance. We can provide air support while you launch your attacks from the ground." "Good plan," Lyra said, her smile fierce. "We'll strike hard and fast. They won't see us coming." As the crew prepped the Starfire, Ilara took a moment to reflect. The resistance fighters had shown great courage in the face of danger, and now they were joining forces. Together, they could make a difference. "Let's give them something to remember," Ilara told her crew, her heart pounding with excitement. The Starfire took to the skies, flanked by the resistance fighters. They had no idea what was coming. As they soared through the canyons, Ilara felt a surge of hope. The fight was far from over, but with allies by their side, humanity was ready to defy the odds. Together, they would stand strong against the threat, proving that they would never submit. The resolve of humanity shone brightly as they prepared to reclaim the clash of forces. The canyon walls echoed with the sounds of battle as the combined forces of the Starfire and the resistance fighters surged toward the supply lines. Captain Ilara Reynolds stood at the helm, her heart racing as she watched the resistance ships maneuvering skillfully through the narrow passes. The air was thick with tension, but there was also an unmistakable sense of determination. They were ready to fight. "Status report," Ilara called out, her eyes glued to the view screen displaying the canyon ahead. "Resistance fighters are in position," Samir replied, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We'll have visual contact with thee in 2 minutes." "Good. We'll strike hard and fast. We cannot give them a chance to regroup," Ilara ordered, gripping the controls tightly. She could feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but she was determined to lead them to victory. As they rounded a corner, the Starfire came into view of the supply lines. Several enemy ships were clustered together, preparing to transport vital resources. The Zetharians were oblivious to the approaching threat, and that was their biggest mistake. "Now," Ilara shouted. The Starfire opened fire, its energy beams slicing through the air. The first ship exploded in a burst of flames, sending debris scattering in all directions. Cheers erupted from the crew as they saw their attack land true. "Nice shot," Mira called from her station. "Keep it up." The resistance fighters followed suit, unleashing a barrage of missiles at the supply ships. They scrambled to react, but the element of surprise was on their side. One by one, the enemy ships were taken down, their supplies igniting in fiery explosions. "Press the attack. Don't let them escape," Ilara commanded, her voice rising above the din of battle. We have to cut off their resources. The crew of the Starfire worked in perfect harmony, their training evident in every maneuver. As they pressed forward, Ilara noticed a cruiser breaking formation. It was larger than the other ships, and it seemed to be preparing to retaliate. "Samur, target that cruiser," Ilara shouted. "We can't let it get a shot off." "On it," he replied, fingers flying over his console as he locked onto the cruiser. The Starfire fired another volley of energy beams, hitting the cruiser with precision. But they were ready this time. They returned fire, and the ship shuddered as impacts rocked its hull. "Shields holding at 80%, Mira reported, her voice tense. "Divert more power to the shields," Ilara ordered, determination fueling her resolve. "We need to keep moving forward." The Starfire dodged the incoming fire, weaving skillfully among the Zetharian vessels. The crew fought like warriors, their spirits high despite the chaos. Each explosion of enemy ships ignited a fire within them, pushing them to fight harder. Just then, Commander Lyra's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain Reynolds, we're making headway on the ground. We've taken out several supply depots, but we need air support. Can you help us take out that cruiser?" Ilara glanced at the battle unfolding around her. The Zetharian cruiser was still firing at the resistance fighters below, its heavy guns wreaking havoc on their positions. "We're on it. Keep holding them off." Ilara steered the Starfire toward the cruiser, determination coursing through her veins. The crew focused intently, their eyes locked on their target. They could do this. "Ready on my mark," Samir said, sweat glistening on his brow as he monitored the targeting systems. As they approached, the Zetharian cruiser unleashed a torrent of fire, targeting both the Starfire and the resistance fighters below. Explosions lit up the sky as nearby resistance ships were caught in the crossfire. "Now," Ilara shouted. The Starfire opened fire once more, a concentrated blast aimed directly at the cruiser's weak spot. The energy beams struck true, causing the ship to tremble. But it wasn't enough. The Zetharians fought back fiercely, retaliating with a flurry of laser fire. "Shields holding at 60%, Mira yelled. "We can't take much more of this." "Keep firing," Ilara commanded, her voice steady. "We need to bring that cruiser down." The battle continued to rage around them, and the odds seemed to shift. Zetharian reinforcements began to arrive, surrounding the Starfire and the resistance fighters. Ilara felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "Focus fire on the cruiser. Don't let them regroup," she shouted, her heart pounding. The crew poured every ounce of energy into the fight. They maneuvered expertly, dodging fire and returning with precision strikes. The Zetharian cruiser was faltering, but it was not defeated yet. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the Starfire. The ship lurched, and alarms blared throughout the cockpit. Ilara steadied herself, gripping the console tightly. "What just happened?" she demanded. "Critical damage to the starboard side. We're losing power," Samir shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "Redirect auxiliary power to the weapons. We need to finish this fight," Ilara ordered, adrenaline coursing through her veins. They pushed through the pain, the Starfire firing relentlessly at the cruiser. The resistance fighters joined in, working in tandem with the Starfire, pouring everything they had into this final strike. "Keep going. We're almost there," Ilara urged, her eyes fixed on the target. Finally, with a massive explosion, the Zetharian cruiser erupted in flames. The shockwave rippled through the air as the crew of the Starfire erupted into cheers. "We did it," Mira exclaimed, her face beaming with joy. But the battle was far from over. The remaining Zetharian ships began to regroup, and Ilara knew they had to act fast. "Let's finish this," Ilara shouted, determination etched on her face. "We have to push forward and take down the rest of the Zetharians, together." With renewed resolve, the Starfire and the resistance fighters charged into the fray. They were not just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for their future. Humanity's spirit burned bright as they faced the darkness together, ready to reclaim what was theirs. The battle for survival. The echoes of victory were still ringing in Ilara's ears when the remaining Zetharian ships began to regroup, forming a tighter formation as they prepared to retaliate. The Starfire, battered but not broken, remained in the thick of the fight, and Ilara knew they had to capitalize on their moment of triumph. Status report. Ilara commanded, scanning the chaos unfolding on the view screen. "We've lost several resistance fighters," Mira said, her voice strained, "but we still have some support left. We can't let the Zetharians regroup. Redirect what power we have left to the forward shields," Ilara ordered. "We need to be ready for whatever they throw at us next." The crew sprang into action, fingers flying over their controls as they made the necessary adjustments. Ilara took a deep breath, her mind racing with strategies and possibilities. They had come so far, but the battle was far from over. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared, breaking Ilara's concentration. "Captain, incoming Zetharian ships," Samir yelled, urgency lacing his voice. "They're closing in fast." Ilara's heart sank as she saw the formation of enemy ships on the screen. The Zetharians were not giving up easily, and they were regrouping with a vengeance. "Braced for impact," she shouted, preparing the crew for the incoming assault. The first volley hit the Starfire with a resounding impact, shaking the entire ship. Ilara struggled to maintain her footing as the alarms blared around her. "Status on shields," she yelled. "Shields holding at 50%. Mira shouted back. "But they won't last much longer at this rate." "Get us out of here," Ilara ordered. "We need to find cover." The crew worked tirelessly to maneuver the ship, dodging enemy fire as they weaved through the debris of fallen Zetharian ships. Ilara's mind raced as she considered their options. They could either try to retreat or risk everything to take down the Zetharian fleet once and for all. "Commander Lyra, can you give us any intel on their formation?" Ilara asked, hoping to get a tactical advantage. "We're picking up their communications," Lyra replied over the comms. "It seems they're trying to regroup. If we can disrupt their formation now, we might be able to take them out." "Then let's do it," Ilara said, resolve hardening within her. "We're going to hit them while they're vulnerable." As they set their course, the Starfire opened fire on the nearest Zetharian ship. The energy beams struck true, igniting a cascade of explosions that sent debris flying. The resistance fighters rallied around them, charging headfirst into the fray. "Stay close to the Starfire," Ilara shouted to the fighters. "We'll cover you." The chaos of battle enveloped them, the roar of engines and the crackle of energy beams filling the air. Ilara felt the adrenaline surging through her veins as she focused on the task at hand. Each decision was crucial, and the fate of their mission rested on their shoulders. "Captain, they're starting to form a counterattack," Samir warned, eyes wide as he monitored the Zetharian ships. "We need to be quick." "Target their lead ship," Ilara commanded. "That's where we'll strike." The Starfire zeroed in on the lead Zetharian vessel, unleashing a powerful blast that shattered its shields. The ship erupted in flames, its crew scrambling to escape. The sight filled Ilara with a fierce determination. "Keep the pressure on," she urged, gripping the controls as they closed in on the remaining enemy ships. Just as they thought they had the upper hand, a sudden wave of fire erupted from the Zetharian fleet, striking the Starfire again. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring as systems began to fail. "Captain, we're losing power to the engines," Mira yelled, panic in her voice. "Divert all remaining power to the shields and weapons," Ilara shouted. "We need to stay in this fight." As they pressed forward, the Starfire was struck again, but Ilara refused to back down. The resistance fighters rallied behind them, their ships moving in perfect harmony as they charged toward the enemy. "Let's finish this," Ilara shouted, determination shining in her eyes. "We're fighting for our home." With renewed vigor, The crew focused their firepower on the remaining Zetharian ships. Explosions filled the air as energy beams struck true, tearing through the enemy ranks. The resistance fighters cheered, their spirits lifted by the sight of their enemies falling. "Keep firing. Don't let up," Ilara urged, her heart racing as they fought with everything they had. Finally, with a massive explosion, the last of the Zetharian ships fell to their combined might. The battlefield fell silent, the echoes of battle replaced by the sounds of cheers and celebration. "We did it," Mira exclaimed, a broad smile spreading across her face. Ilara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the battle begin to lift. "We've won this battle, but the war is far from over," she reminded her crew. "We need to regroup and prepare for whatever comes next." As they began to assess the damage to the Starfire, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they had entered a new phase of their fight. The Zetharians would not take this defeat lightly. They would come back stronger, and humanity had to be ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But for now, they had proven their strength and their resolve. The spirit of humanity burned bright, and they would not be easily extinguished. Together, they would continue to fight for their survival, defying the odds with every challenge they faced. The Alliance. In the aftermath of the battle, the remnants of the Zetharian fleet lay scattered across the void, their ships reduced to debris. The Starfire floated amid the wreckage, a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit. Ilara stood on the bridge, looking out at the destruction, a mix of pride and concern swirling within her. They had won a hard-fought victory, but at what cost? "Captain," Mira interrupted her thoughts. "We need to assess our damage and check on the other ships in the fleet." Ilara nodded, her gaze still fixed on the drifting debris. "Agreed. Let's see how the others fared. We can't afford to be complacent now." As they began the process of evaluating their situation, the crew moved about the bridge, their faces reflecting a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. They were all aware that this victory was only the beginning. The Zetharians would regroup and strike again, and they needed to be ready. "Commander Lyra," Ilara called, turning her attention to the communications officer. "Can you reach out to the other ships? See if they need assistance." "On it, Captain," Lyra replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "I'll also try to establish a secure channel to our allies." While Lyra worked, Ilara began to consider their next steps. They needed more than just their own strength to face the looming threat of the Zetharian fleet. They needed allies, and they needed to make their presence felt across the galaxy. "Captain," Lyra said, breaking the silence, "we've got a response from the Valiant. They took heavy losses, but are still operational. The Elysium is in worse shape. They've requested immediate assistance." "Send what we can to the Elysium," Ilara instructed. "We can't leave our people behind. They fought bravely, and we owe it to them to help." As the crew began coordinating the assistance efforts, a transmission crackled to life on the screen. The face of Admiral Riker from the Valiant appeared, his expression serious but resolute. "Captain Ilara, good to see you," he said, his voice steady. "We've suffered losses, but we are ready to regroup and strike back." "We have to strike while the iron is hot," Ilara replied. "But we can't do it alone. We need to form a coalition. Bring in every ship that can fight." Admiral Riker nodded. "I agree. I'll reach out to the other resistance factions. Together, we can build a formidable force." The two leaders exchanged strategies, discussing the importance of unity in the face of adversity. As they spoke, Ilara felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the turning point they needed, a chance to build something greater than themselves. After concluding the call, Ilara gathered her crew on the bridge. "Listen up, everyone. We've faced down the Zetharians, but we need to keep pushing forward. We're going to reach out to every resistance group we can find. We need allies, and we need them now." Cheers erupted among the crew. Their spirits, already buoyed by victory, soared at the prospect of building alliances. They were ready to take the fight to the Zetharians and show the galaxy that humanity would not be subdued. "Let's get to work," Ilara commanded. "Mira, set a course for the nearest resistance base. We'll gather intelligence and see who's willing to join our cause." As the Starfire turned its engines to the nearby outpost, the crew worked efficiently, readying themselves for what lay ahead. Ilara felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but also a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer just a group of ships. They were a movement. Hours later, the Starfire arrived at the outpost, a bustling hub of resistance fighters. Ilara and her crew disembarked, greeted by the weary but determined faces of those who had survived countless battles against the Zetharians. "Welcome to the Rebels' Haven," said the leader of the outpost, a tall woman named Jessa. Her eyes held a fierce intensity, one that reflected the resolve of those who had fought tirelessly for their freedom. "Captain Ilara," Jessa continued, extending a hand, "I've heard of your victory. It's given us all hope." "Thank you," Ilara replied, shaking her hand firmly. "But this is just the beginning. We need to unite our forces to stand against the Zetharians. Are you willing to join us?" Jessa nodded, her expression resolute. "We've been waiting for a leader to rally us. The Zetharians won't stop until they've crushed us all. Together, we stand a chance." Ilara felt a surge of energy among the resistance fighters. They were all aware of the risks, but the fire of determination burned brightly in their hearts. They had seen the strength of humanity, and they were ready to fight for their freedom. As they gathered to discuss their plans, alliances began to form. Ilara shared the strategies from her previous battles, while Jessa detailed the intel they had gathered about the fleet. They were all working together, united by a common cause. "Let's make our stand here," Ilara declared. "We'll fortify this base and prepare for the next assault. But we'll also reach out to other factions. We'll show them that humanity doesn't bow to threats." With renewed vigor, the crew and their new allies began preparing the outpost for battle. They reinforced defenses, trained fighters, and coordinated plans for their next steps. As the sun set over the distant stars, Ilara stood on the outpost's command deck, looking out at the vastness of space. She felt a sense of determination washing over her. This was just the beginning of their journey. Humanity was coming together, and they would not be silenced. Together, they would face the darkness and fight for their future. The battle for survival was far from over, but they were ready to meet it head-on. Final stand. As dawn broke over the horizon of the outpost, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and tension. The combined forces of humanity had gathered, ready to face the fleet in what they all knew would be a decisive battle. Ilara stood on the command deck of the Starfire, surrounded by her crew and their new allies, each one wearing the scars of past battles but united in their resolve. "Listen up, everyone," Ilara began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today, we fight not just for our lives, but for the future of humanity. They think they can crush us, but they will see that we are stronger together. We will show them that we are not afraid." Cheers erupted from the gathered fighters, a chorus of defiance echoing through the command center. Each person there understood the stakes. They had lost friends and loved ones to the aggression. They were not merely fighting for themselves, but for every human who had suffered at the hands of their enemies. "Jessa," Ilara called, turning to the leader of the resistance outpost. "What's the status of our forces?" Jessa stepped forward, her expression serious. "We have a solid coalition ready to fight. The Valiant and the Elysium have rallied their remaining ships, and we've reinforced our defenses here. Our scouts report that the fleet is on the move and could arrive within the hour." "Good," Ilara replied, determination igniting in her chest. "We will set up a defensive line around the outpost. If we can hold them here, we'll protect the other resistance groups in the sector." The crew moved quickly, coordinating their ships and preparing for battle. As they worked, Ilara felt the weight of leadership pressing down on her shoulders. She knew that every decision she made could mean the difference between victory and defeat. "Captain," Mira interrupted, her brow furrowed with concern. "We're receiving a transmission from them. They're demanding our surrender." Ilara's jaw clenched. What do they think this is? A negotiation. "We'll never surrender to tyranny." "Shall I respond?" Mira asked. "Not yet," Ilara replied. "Let them think we're considering it. We need to buy ourselves some time." As the ships drew closer, the atmosphere on the outpost turned electric. The combined forces of humanity gathered in formation, their ships ready to defend their ground. Ilara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Soon, the first Zetharian ships appeared on the horizon, a dark wave of destruction advancing toward them. The enemy fleet was massive, bristling with weaponry, their intent clear. The sight sent a chill through Ilara's spine, but she quickly pushed it aside. They had come too far to back down now. "Prepare for battle," Ilara shouted, her voice ringing with authority. "All hands to battle stations." The crew rushed to their posts, adrenaline pumping through their veins. The sound of alarms filled the air as the ships powered up their weapon systems. Ilara felt the energy of determination coursing through her crew. They were ready. As the Zetharian ships closed in, Ilara focused on her targets, issuing commands with precision. "Target their weapon systems first. We need to disable their firepower." The Starfire erupted into action, its weapons blazing against the incoming enemy fleet. Bright streaks of energy shot through the void, colliding with Zetharian ships, causing them to explode in flashes of light. The crew of the Starfire fought valiantly, their resolve unbroken as they pushed back against the tide. The outpost's defenses held strong, and the Allied ships flanked the Zetharians, fighting together in a coordinated assault. The sight was breathtaking, a symphony of light and chaos, with humanity standing its ground against overwhelming odds. But the Zetharians were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. Explosions rocked the battlefield, and the air crackled with energy. Ilara could see the Elysium taking heavy fire, its shields flickering dangerously. "Mira," Ilara shouted, urgency in her voice. "Get a team to assist the Elysium. They need cover." "On it," Mira responded, rallying a group of fighters to support their allies. As they engaged in the fray, Ilara's heart raced. She could feel the weight of every decision they made. Each moment counted, and every ship was a life at stake. The battle raged on, but slowly the tide began to turn. The Zetharians, overconfident in their numbers, found themselves outmaneuvered by the cunning tactics of humanity. As the Allied forces worked together, they struck with precision, picking off the Zetharian ships one by one. "Keep pushing," Ilara urged, her voice rising above the cacophony. "We can't let up now." But just as victory seemed within reach, a massive Zetharian cruiser emerged from the chaos, its guns trained on the Starfire. Ilara's heart sank as the ship opened fire, a barrage of energy beams hurtling toward them. "Brace for impact," she shouted, adrenaline surging through her body. The Starfire shuddered as the energy blasts struck its shields, sending shockwaves through the ship. Ilara held onto her console, her mind racing. They needed to disable that cruiser before it could inflict more damage. "Focus all fire on that cruiser," she commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We can't let it break our line." With renewed determination, the Starfire and its allies concentrated their fire on the massive ship. The energy beams pierced through the void, striking the cruiser's shields and causing them to falter. Slowly, they chipped away at its defenses. "Keep firing," Ilara urged. "We're almost through." As the cruiser's shields finally collapsed, a cheer erupted from the crew. They poured everything they had into the ship, the energy beams converging in a brilliant explosion. The cruiser disintegrated before their eyes, a testament to humanity's unyielding spirit. But the battle was not over yet. The Zetharians, now desperate, began to retreat, regrouping their remaining ships. Ilara felt a surge of hope, but knew that the fight was far from over. "Let's pursue," Ilara commanded, her voice ringing with conviction. We can't let them regroup. We need to show them that humanity will always rise. As the Starfire led the charge, the crew followed suit, their hearts united in purpose. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their future, for their place among the stars. And with every pulse of energy fired into the void, they proved that humanity would never submit. They would stand tall, defying the odds, and carving their own destiny among the stars. The galaxy would remember this day, not just as a battle fought, but as the moment humanity chose to rise.